Hello and welcome to this video. Today I will talk in English and it's about one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century, the Roswell Incident. For those who don't know what this is all about, a brief information. The incident is about the crash of an unknown flying object in 1947 near the small town of Roswell. It all started on June 24th, 1947, when the US media reported frequent UFO sightings. It was triggered by a report from pilot Kenneth Arnold, who made an eerie observation during a private flight. He reports observing 9 flat, disc-shaped objects near Mount Rainier. According to Arnold, they flew in a formation and had an extremely high speed. Their movements, he says, were reminiscent of saucers bouncing over water. From him comes the term flying saucer. Then, in early July, rancher William Brazel also heard about the UFO rumors and reported the crash of an object on his property. The Roswell sheriff arrived on July 7th and called in the army because he couldn't do anything with the debris he saw. 2 army personnel arrived a little later, but couldn't do much with the debris themselves either. They collected it and took it to Fort Worth Army Base in Texas, where it was to be examined. Just 1 day later, the first headline appeared in the newspaper. RRRF, the abbreviation for the army base that collected the debris, finds flying saucer. It also says that a couple in Roswell had seen an orange glowing object in the sky a few days earlier, moving northwest at high speed. After many US media outlets picked up the story, General Roger Ramey, in the presence of an army weather expert, explained that it was part of a weather balloon used for wind measurements. Journalists were allowed to photograph certain parts, and 1 day later the media reported that the fuss was unfounded. A description of the parts has also been published. William Brazel, the rancher, describes them as follows. It was a lot of thick paper and aluminium foil, and grey rubber strips. He also saw sticks, tape, and letters on the debris. He had examined it and collected the parts and tried to assemble them with the officials, but not to avail, he said. He was already sure at that time that it was not a weather balloon and maintained this until his death. He had already had such weather balloons twice in his area, and they had no resemblance to this one. After the interview, media interest ebbed away, and the story was forgotten until 1978. But in that year, 2 ufologists arrived with an interview they had conducted with Jesse Marshall, a soldier who had viewed the original debris and sent everyone into an uproar. He still remembers very sturdy struts made of balsa wood-like material, which were printed with characters. He also describes a thin, tear-resistant foil made of unknown metal. His companion had also found a black metal box, but at the press conference such parts were not shown. According to Marshall, they were unimportant parts or even fakes. Like the others who saw the site at the ranch, he is convinced that the debris did not come from Earth. In 1980, the book The Roswell Incidence was published, in which 2 more witnesses talk about the cover-up of a UFO crash by the US Army. That extraterrestrials are also mentioned in this report. A man who died in 1951 mentioned to friends shortly before his death that he had seen a UFO crash site with several small dead bodies on the St. Augustine Plain. He was then sent away and sworn to silence. The interesting thing is that a mortician testified that an army representative ordered airtight child coffins a few days after the crash. It gets even stranger when you add the report of a nurse who reports having participated in the autopsy of several infantile lepers. Then in 1989, an episode of television series appeared that dealt with the reconstruction of the incident. Thereupon an amateur geologist reported 3 dead aliens under the crashed UFO and even mentions a living one. The fact that this report coincides with the one from 1951 is very remarkable. Things get even stranger when ex-soldier Frank Kaufman testifies that in 1947, as a member of a search party near Brazel's ranch, He saw a half-intact crashed UFO with several dead bodies next to it. This also coincides with the other reports. It became quiet again until in 1997, Philip J. Corso claimed, as former head of foreign technology for the army, to have examined debris from an alien wreck and that its technology was used to advance Earth technology. This is not true, and this book was voted on one of the top 10 literary lies. Even then, the book became big attention, and not just Philip J. Corso himself and the media. No, nearly entire America believed the story. However, a few years earlier, in 1990, something happened. A petition was filed demanding that the government's UFO files be disclosed. In 1994, Stephen Fish, a member of the House of Representatives, ordered the investigation of cover-up allegations regarding the Roswell incident. It came out, for example, that Roswell was not included in Project Blue Book, a government project to document UFO sightings. There was a public hearing to clarify how to handle such files. An investigation report was then published on July 27, 1994. The debris was allegedly a hexagonally shaped radar target attached to a balloon. However, contrary to what was claimed at the time, it was not an ordinary weather balloon. It was part of Project Mogul, which tested whether sound waves could be used to detect Soviet nuclear tests. According to witnesses, the debris found on Brazil's ranch property belonged to a balloon train that was launched on June 4th. It was also admitted that the crash was covered up to keep the project secret. One explanation why none of the people present at the ranch could identify the balloon was that the project was very young. Consequently, no one had ever seen such a balloon before. However, it's quite likely that files were falsified or destroyed, because only 2 files from 1947 were found. Moreover, these reports did not address witness statements in any way. A 1997 movement came into the game, when suddenly witnesses admitted the dead aliens were probably crash test dummies, which were often used in the time in order to test parachute behavior. These were often damaged, so they looked dead and were taken away in coffin-like wooden boxes. By these reports, ufologists, in addition, independent critics saw themselves rather confirmed in the assumption that something was covered up. The several witnesses, who often saw these test dummies over years, thought they were aliens in exactly one event is practically impossible. One of the witnesses even made a comparison between the dead and such mannequins. Another question remains. What about witnesses who report selling children's coffins to the military or assisting in autopsies of unknown bodies? This was not really discussed, and it's still a mystery today. So, I have a little summary for you. In 1947, a farmer finds strange debris that he reports to the authorities after rumors of UFO sightings. The military gets involved and removes the debris. When the press releases 2 days later, the whole thing is played down as harmless. However, people involved who saw the debris at the farm say it never came from a weather balloon and that unimportant parts and fakes were shown at the press conference. Then the UFO thesis came up when a nurse, a mortician, and a soldier make statements almost simultaneously. The nurse says she worked on the autopsy of small creatures. The mortician says the military bought a small children's coffin from him, and the soldier reports a crash site and corpses of small, childlike creatures. The government does not respond and interest ebbs away. It was not until the 1980s that the topic was taken up again, and the government was forced to explain itself. After the files came to light, however, it is discovered that a considerable part had been destroyed. In addition, the government then conjures up Project Mogul, which identifies the debris as parts of a prototype. When old witnesses change their minds, everything is pulled on hold again. However, all this is also viewed very critically by experts. The question remains, what happened back then? There are explanations, but they are not very credible. What is clear is that something was covered up. What exactly this really was isn't clarified and may never will be. We don't know what is out there, and there's probably not always a logic explanation for everything. Did aliens really crash near Roswell in 1947? Did really the government cover up such a crash? Are there really dead aliens, and maybe even a living one? The Roswell Incident is and remains a mystery that keeps me, and now maybe you, busy. And who knows, maybe someday the truth will come to light. I hope you enjoyed the video, and would be happy if you leave a comment. I want to apologize for my not very fluent and not perfect English. It's not my maternal language, so please don't be angry at me. So have a nice day, and I hope to see you next time when I record a video. So